He never believed in love. For Nathan Kingsley, heir to a billion-dollar empire, life was a game, and he was always winning. Parties, private jets, champagne on ice. Nothing ever challenged him. Nothing ever touched his heart. That is, until a single night at the Monarch Club changed everything. "But you wouldn't marry a girl like her," his friend smirked, pointing to the quiet waitress pouring drinks with a grace too elegant for someone in that uniform. "Not your type." Nathan grinned. That was all the challenge he needed. He leaned back in his leather chair, glanced at the girl, and said the words that would change both their lives. "Watch me." Her name was Eliza. She didn't know luxury. She didn't chase dreams. She worked to survive. Every morning started at 4 a.m. She shared a room with her sister, took 2 buses to work, and sent most of her paycheck back home to her mother. Love? She didn't have time for that. And yet, when Nathan approached her with that confident charm, she felt something shift. He seemed different. Rich, yes, but kind maybe. Or at least curious. Their whirlwind romance shocked everyone. 3 weeks after that first conversation, they were married. Just like that. Eliza didn't know about the bet. She didn't know she was a game. She only knew that Nathan made her laugh, that he brought flowers to her job, that he told her she was more than beautiful. She was extraordinary. But Nathan wasn't in love. Not yet. He was playing a role, acting out the part of the smitten billionaire. For the first month, it was fun. Eliza was sweet, grounded, smart. Too smart, he thought at times. But the thrill was still there. His friends watched with amusement. "You'll be divorced in a month," they said. And Nathan believed them. Until everything started to change. It began with the way she looked at the world. Eliza didn't care about yachts or fashion shows. She wanted real conversations. She asked about his childhood, about who he was before the money. No one ever did that. And Nathan found himself answering her, talking about things he'd buried. His mother's absence, his father's pressure, the weight of inheriting something he never asked for. Then came the moment that shattered everything. It was a Sunday morning. Rain tapped against the glass walls of their penthouse. Nathan was hungover, grumpy and distant. Eliza stood in the kitchen, making pancakes like it was any other day. Then she turned to him and said, "Why do you hate yourself so much?" He froze. No one had ever asked that. And for the first time, he couldn't find a clever answer. From that day on, the game started to slip. He stopped checking his phone during dinner. He began listening. He even canceled a trip to Monaco to stay home and help Eliza paint their new guest room. Something inside him was unraveling quietly, steadily. But just when he thought he was falling for her, she found the letter. In a forgotten drawer, tucked behind an old receipt, she found the crumpled envelope. Inside, the original bet, written in Nathan's handwriting, signed by him and his smug friend. Bet, $50,000. He marries the waitress. She lasts 30 days. Eliza didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply packed a bag, left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and walked out. Nathan came home to silence. And that was when he realized he had just lost everything. But that was only the beginning. Nathan stood in the center of the penthouse, surrounded by luxury. But for the first time in his life, he felt poor, empty. The silence was brutal. The absence of Eliza's humming as she watered the plants. Her worn-out sneakers by the door, gone. Her favorite tea mug, gone. The wedding photo that used to sit on the counter, now shattered in the trash. He picked up the letter, the cursed proof of his arrogance, and read it again and again, as if the ink might change, as if the words could somehow undo themselves. He had never chased anyone before, never had to, but for the first time, he felt desperation, real, aching regret. He called her, no answer. Texted, nothing. He went to her old apartment, the bus stop where she used to wait, even her mother's house. But Eliza was gone, like a ghost that had touched his soul and vanished. Days turned into weeks. Nathan began to unravel. He stopped attending board meetings. His father called, furious. "You're ruining the family name for some girl?" But Nathan didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't living for his father, or his friends, or even his reputation. He wanted Eliza, not to win her back, not for pride, but because without her, everything else felt meaningless. Meanwhile, Eliza had disappeared into the countryside. She took a small room in an old inn, where no one knew her name. She worked in the kitchen, kept her head down, and cried only at night when no one could hear. But she wasn't broken. She was planning, healing, rebuilding. She refused to let a man's cruelty define her. And that's when something changed. She started painting again. Eliza used to dream of being an artist, but poverty had pushed those dreams aside. Now, with nothing left to lose, she picked up a brush. And slowly, quietly, her grief transformed into beauty. Her paintings, raw, emotional, full of light and shadow, caught the eye of a local gallery owner. Within a month, she was offered her first exhibition. Within 6 months, she had her own studio. Her name started to spread. Eliza Winslow, the mystery artist with fire in her soul. Nathan saw one of her pieces by accident. A swirling storm of red and gold titled Betrayal. He knew immediately it was about him. And that's when the second wave of guilt hit. It wasn't just that he hurt her. He had buried her light, taken something sacred, and turned it into a spectacle. But she had risen without him. And that was when Nathan decided to disappear. He left the city, sold his shares in the company, bought a small cabin by a lake where no one knew his name. He chopped wood, cooked his own meals, wrote long letters he never sent. He lived quietly, simply, and day by day, he became someone else, someone real, the kind of man Eliza once believed he could be. One day he received an invitation, a gallery opening, Eliza Winslow's largest exhibit yet, titled Owned. The irony wasn't lost on him. He hesitated, then bought a ticket. He didn't expect forgiveness. He just wanted to see her again. From a distance even, the gallery was packed. Cameras flashed, critics buzzed, and there she was, Eliza, in a white dress, eyes radiant, smile unshakable. She stood in front of a giant canvas, half light, half darkness, with a man walking a tightrope between them. The piece was called The Bet. And then her eyes met his, just for a second. And in that second, everything changed. Their eyes locked, and the noise of the gallery faded. For a moment, it felt like the world had paused, holding its breath. Nathan didn't move, didn't smile. He didn't deserve to. He stood quietly in the crowd, letting Eliza see him as he truly was, no longer the king of anything, no longer the man who won bets, just a man who had lost what mattered most. She held his gaze for only a second more before turning back to the press, posing for photos, answering questions with calm precision. The second passed, but Nathan felt its weight like a lifetime. He didn't approach her. He couldn't. Instead, he wandered through the exhibit, heart pounding. Each painting told a piece of their story. The ring, a shattered silver circle resting in a sea of gray. 30 days, a ticking clock with melting numbers. Her exit, a silhouette walking through a door with flames behind her. But it wasn't all pain. In the final room, the color softened. New roots, a tree growing from cracked pavement. Healing, 2 hands reaching, not touching but close. And finally, ownership, the last piece. This one was unlike all the rest. A mirror, nothing painted, just a mirror in a golden frame, with a plaque underneath. Look closely. What do you see? Nathan stared into it. He saw himself, older, wiser, smaller than he remembered. And for the first time, he whispered the truth. I don't own anything. She owns herself, and I am owned by what I did. He turned to leave, ready to disappear once more. But as he reached the exit, a voice called out behind him, soft, familiar. You came. He turned. Eliza stood there, not angry, not smiling, just present. I wasn't sure you would, she said, arms folded gently. I didn't plan to, he replied, but I needed to see, not you, the truth. A long pause. Then she asked, and did you? He nodded, every inch of it. They stood there, 2 ghosts of a love story never meant to survive, but ghosts too can find peace. Eliza gestured toward a quiet bench outside the gallery. Walk with me? Nathan followed. The night was cool, the city humming. They sat under a streetlight, saying nothing for a long while. Finally, Nathan spoke. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't. What I did was cruel, thoughtless. I don't know why I was that man, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying not to be him again. Eliza looked up at the stars, her voice calm. You hurt me in a way I didn't know was possible. You turned love into a lie, and I hated you for it. But then, I used it. I turned it into something real. You gave me pain, and I turned it into power. So no, maybe I can't forgive you yet, but I don't hate you anymore. Nathan swallowed, eyes stinging. That's more than I deserve. She turned to him, and maybe it's enough for now. Another long silence. Then she stood. I have to go. I have a flight to Tokyo in the morning. He smiled faintly. Of course you do. You're a star now. She laughed softly. No, just someone who finally remembered who she is. Nathan stood, unsure if he should hug her, shake her hand, or just let her go. Eliza solved it for him. She stepped forward, kissed his cheek gently, and whispered, "Goodbye, Nathan." And then she was gone. Again. But this time it wasn't the end. Nathan stood alone on that city sidewalk, the warmth of her kiss still lingering on his cheek, like a ghost. But this wasn't heartbreak. It was something different. It was closure. Not the sharp, painful kind that rips away illusions, but the kind that settles gently into your soul and lets you breathe again. He watched her walk away, without chasing her this time, because he understood now. Eliza didn't belong to anyone. She wasn't a prize to be won, or a woman to be possessed. She had become a force of her own. And in a strange, poetic twist, he finally respected her enough to let go. But life has a curious way of continuing stories we thought were over. Over the next year, Nathan quietly rebuilt his own world. No headlines, no boardrooms, no noise. He started volunteering at an art center for underprivileged youth, teaching kids how to turn pain into expression. It felt right, honest. Every time he stepped into that room filled with cracked canvases and messy paint, he felt closer to the man he should have always been. He stopped trying to become someone important and just started being someone real. Meanwhile, Eliza soared. Her Tokyo show sold out. Paris followed. Then Milan. She became known not just for her art, but for her story. A woman who took betrayal and turned it into brilliance. Talk shows wanted her. Magazines begged for interviews, but she never shared the details. She protected the truth, not out of shame, but out of power. Her silence was louder than any headline could scream. And behind that silence was a quiet strength and a memory she hadn't forgotten. Because despite the miles, the applause, the lights, sometimes she thought about Nathan. Not the old Nathan, but the man he was becoming. She'd see a man on the street pause to help a stranger and wonder if he was still out there, becoming, changing, redeeming. Fate doesn't always knock twice, but sometimes it whispers. A year after that final goodbye, Eliza returned to New York for a special exhibit. It wasn't about heartbreak this time. It was about healing. The theme, echoes of growth. She rented a small studio across the river, away from the press. Quiet, private. On her second morning back, she stopped by a cafe she used to love, tucked in between a bookstore and a flower shop. She ordered her usual Earl Grey tea with honey and turned to find a seat. And there he was, Nathan, sitting at a corner table with a sketchbook in front of him, pencil in hand, eyes focused. He didn't see her at first. He was lost in the page. She hesitated, heart thumping. The air thickened. She could leave, pretend she didn't see him, let the story stay closed. But she didn't. She walked over, quietly, gently. Still drawing, she said. Nathan looked up, and for the first time in over a year, they smiled at the same time. Eliza, just her name. No expectations, no tension, just a breath. She sat across from him, and they talked. About nothing, about everything, about art and cities, and what it means to rebuild yourself from the ashes of your own mistakes. They didn't mention the past, not yet, but it hovered unspoken, like a soft wind that didn't chill, but carried truth. They began meeting there often. No labels, no rush, just two people, bruised by life, learning how to exist beside each other again. Not out of need, not out of guilt, but because something in both of them had changed. And then one rainy afternoon, Eliza asked, "Do you ever think people deserve a second chance? Not because they ask for it, but because they've earned it." Nathan answered without looking up, "Only if they've already forgiven themselves first." She smiled, The rain tapped gently against the cafe windows like fingers playing a quiet piano. Eliza stared at her tea, her mind spinning, not with confusion, but clarity. For the first time, she wasn't wondering who Nathan used to be. She was watching who he had become. And in that transformation, there was something beautiful. Not perfect, not clean, but real, raw. The kind of beauty you can only find when something is broken and been put back together. Differently, stronger. Across from her, Nathan didn't try to impress. He didn't perform. He didn't even try to fix things. He simply existed beside her, in a silence that was full rather than empty. And when she laughed at something, he said, a real laugh, not the polite kind. They both paused. They both noticed it. That laugh was a spark. And sparks, if they land in the right place, can start fires. Over the next few weeks, they kept meeting. Coffee turned into long walks. Long walks turned into studio visits. Nathan showed her the art the kids at the community center were making. He wasn't painting much himself anymore. He was letting others create, letting others heal. Eliza was moved by it. The man who once saw life as a game now saw it as a canvas for others. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, they sat on a bench in Central Park. The city buzzed around them, but they were still, like the eye of a storm. Nathan broke the quiet. Do you know the moment I knew you'd never belong to me? She tilted her head. That night at your gallery, he said, when you turned pain into power, when you stood there in front of all those people, proud and whole. That's when I realized I never owned you. I never could. But somehow, without trying, you own me. Not in a cruel way. Not in the way I once did to you, but in the way someone owns the truth. The way someone owns your respect. Eliza looked down, heart racing. It wasn't flattery. It was surrender. And not the weak kind, but the brave kind. The kind that says, I'm not hiding anymore. You don't owe me anything, she whispered. You know that, right? No, he replied. But I owe myself the truth. And the truth is, I love who you are. Not because I want something from you, but because I finally see you. And I want to be a man worthy of being seen by you too. Silence. And then, without a word, Eliza rested her head on his shoulder. Not as a declaration, not as a promise, but as a beginning, a small one, fragile like wet paint, but full of potential. The next day, something unexpected happened. A well-known art foundation reached out to Eliza. They wanted her to head a new international residency program for young artists. A dream offer, but it would mean relocating. Again, months away, constant travel. She told Nathan that night over dinner. His face didn't fall, but it changed. A flicker of old fear crossed his eyes. Loss. But then he caught himself and smiled softly. You have to go, he said. You're not even going to try to talk me out of it? She asked, half teasing, half hopeful. He shook his head. No, that's what the old me would have done. This version, he just wants you to fly. She reached across the table and took his hand. I want to come back, she said. Then I'll be here, he answered. And just like that, they both understood something powerful. Sometimes, the truest kind of love is the one that doesn't demand. It doesn't chain. It doesn't cage. It waits. It grows. It holds space. The months that followed were a test, not of passion, but of patience. Eliza traveled across continents, planting seeds of creativity in young hearts from Nairobi to Copenhagen. She sent Nathan photos, messy workshops, paint-splattered kids, sunrises over unfamiliar skylines. He replied with updates from the center, sharing sketches drawn by trembling hands that finally found courage. Their messages weren't constant, but they were honest. They weren't long, but they were deep. Each word carried weight. Each silence carried trust. What surprised them both was how peaceful the distance felt. No drama, no jealousy. Just two people living their own lives, yet still tethered by something stronger than proximity. Respect, growth, a quiet, unshakable connection that didn't need to be allowed to be real. Nathan, in her absence, did more than wait. He grew, not upwards but inward. He stopped needing validation. He started mentoring full-time, wrote a book about using art as healing, and even opened a small gallery featuring pieces from kids who had never once been inside a museum. He named it The Undoing. When asked why, he said, because sometimes we have to unravel who we were before we can become who we're meant to be. Meanwhile, Eliza faced her own challenges. One night in Istanbul, she stood in front of a class full of skeptical teenagers. They doubted her, doubted art, doubted everything. And she saw in their eyes the same resistance she once felt, the resistance to trust. But she remembered what Nathan once told her, that true influence doesn't come from shouting. It comes from showing up. So she showed up again and again until they started to paint, until they started to speak, until they started to believe. In those quiet moments, miles apart, they both realized something profound. They were no longer haunted by who they used to be. They had become the people they needed to be for each other, and more importantly, for themselves. 6 months later, Eliza returned to New York. No fanfare, no press, just her suitcase and a bouquet of wildflowers Nathan had sent to the airport with a note that said, "The studio has been quiet without your chaos." She laughed when she read it. He was waiting at the cafe. Same corner table, same sketchbook, but this time she didn't sit across from him. She sat beside him. And when she rested her head on his shoulder again, it wasn't tentative. It was home. They didn't talk much that evening. Didn't need to. The air around them was full of everything unsaid. Trust rebuilt, love redefined, lives reinvented. What began as a bet had become a bond, not born from strategy, but from sincerity. Not one, but earned. 1 week later, at a quiet dinner with close friends, Nathan stood up and raised a glass. "I once married this woman for all the wrong reasons," he said, looking at Eliza. "I thought I was clever. I thought I could outplay life. But the truth is, life outplayed me. She outgrew me. She left. And then she taught me how to grow too." Eliza reached for his hand. "I don't belong to him," she said. "He doesn't belong to me. But in a way, we now belong to something greater, each other's respect." The room was silent, but hearts thundered. A month after that quiet dinner, Nathan stood in front of a crowd again. But this time it wasn't at a luxury gala or some pretentious launch party. It was the opening of a new wing at The Undoing, an entire floor dedicated to stories of transformation. Each room held an immersive installation inspired by real lives that had changed through art. At the entrance was a single plaque. No fanfare, just one name, Eliza Morgan. She didn't know he was going to do it. As she stepped inside, her breath caught. The first exhibit wasn't art, it was a mirror. Above it, a quote. The woman who saw herself clearly, even when the world tried to blur her edges. Visitors passed by quietly, but Eliza stood there frozen. This wasn't just love. This was reverence. Nathan hadn't just told her he changed. He showed her, in front of everyone, not by declaring her his possession, but by declaring her his inspiration. Later that night, on the rooftop of the gallery, he pulled a small box from his pocket. She gave him a sharp look. "Nathan," he held up a hand. "It's not what you think." Inside was a ring, but it wasn't gold. It wasn't even a diamond. It was a twisted silver band, handmade, with a single word engraved inside. "Yours. I don't need to marry you again," he said. "But I need you to know, no matter where you go, no matter who you become, this heart, this life is yours. Not as a prize, but as a promise." Tears welled up in her eyes, and with a trembling breath she whispered, "Then let me give you something too." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside was a letter. It was her offer to become the artistic director of a new foundation she'd co-founded overseas, and her decision to decline it. "I want to keep building this," she said, "with you, with the kids, with the city that taught me how to rise." Nathan didn't say a word. He just kissed her hand, and there, beneath a sky painted in stars, two people who once began in lies stood wrapped in the most honest thing they'd ever known: unconditional love. Life is strange. Sometimes it gives you everything you asked for just to show you it's not what you needed. Sometimes it breaks you just to rebuild you stronger. Eliza thought love was a trap. Nathan thought love was a game. But in losing control, they found something real, something powerful, something human. Because the truth is, we don't own people, but we can belong to each other in the purest way, through honesty, respect, and growth. And that kind of love changes everything. If this story touched your heart, Leave a like to let us know. Subscribe for more emotional stories just like this one. And tell us in the comments, what moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the bet, the breakup, the growth, or the final rooftop promise? Thank you for watching. See you soon.